Hi KX, we are here to begin Young Arthur. So far we've read Young Guinevere, we've learned a little bit about Young Merlin, and now we are on Young Arthur. This book is also by the author Robert Sanssouci, and it is illustrated by Jamichael Henterly. Let's assume that's Young Arthur, right? Young Arthur. It says, long ago, as King Uther and Merlin watched, a fiery dragon shape blazed among the stars over Stonehenge, foretelling the birth of Arthur, the greatest king of all. King Uther, do you remember you met King Uther at the end of Merlin and the Dragons, right? He's the one that defeated Vortigern. Remember, Vortigern is the one who built his tower. He was the red dragon, and Uther is the white dragon. So here is Uther. King Uther heard the baby's wail and leaped to his feet. There was a sharp rap at the chamber door, and a servant entered, grinning happily. You have a son, he told the king. Uther's joy knew no bounds. When he was ushered into Queen Igerna's bedchamber, Uther looked... Escher, can you close the door? Looked lovingly at his mother and son. The boy's name shall be Arthur, he declared, and he shall be a great king, for Merlin has foretold that he will one day rule the greatest kingdom under heaven. But Uther's happiness did not last. His beloved queen died soon after Arthur's birth, and sadness sapped the king's spirit. He lost interest in ruling, and Merlin was unable to rouse him from his melancholy. Unrest grows throughout the land, Merlin warned. Your old foes or enemies are rising in rebellion. Give the babe into my keeping, for you have enemies even at court. So Merlin is telling Uther to give him the baby, because first of all, Uther is not being a very good father, right, Eshi? He's a little distracted. His wife just died. And Merlin is also saying that he thinks it's dangerous for the baby to be there because some people may not want Uther to be king. And if there's a danger to the king, there's always a danger to the king or queen's children. Anxious for his son's safety, Uther agreed. So Merlin, disguised as a beggar, took the infant Arthur to Sir Ector and his lady, who lived some distance from the court and all its dangers. He told them nothing about the child, save that his name was Arthur. The couple had recently lost their infant son and welcomed Arthur as their own. Okay. Since soon rebellion divided the kingdom, Uther, reclaiming his old spirit, rallied his knights and barons. With Merlin always beside him, he drove back his enemies. But as Uther celebrated his victory in the town of Verulam, traitors, so those are people who are going to betray Uther or break his trust, poisoned the town's wells, so the water's poisoned. The king and his loyal followers were stricken or got sick. Merlin alone escaped. Though he tried his healing arts on Uther, he was forced to confess, Sire, there is no remedy. Then, to the dying monarch, I declare that my son shall be the king of all this realm after me. God's blessing and mine be upon him. With those words, Uther died. When the rebels entered Verulam, only Merlin was alive. Tell us where Uther's son is hidden, they demanded, so that we can slay him and end Uther's line. But Merlin vanished before their eyes. So the rebels, the ones who don't accept the rule of Uther is gone, but they are concerned about who wouldn't be next in line, and that would be Arthur. So that's why they're looking for Arthur, and luckily they took the baby to a safe place. Young Arthur was raised as a son in Sir Ector's house. He learned to read and write alongside his foster brother, Kay, who was 4 years older. By the time he was 15, Arthur was tall and quick-witted. Though he had great strength, he also had a gentle manner. Kay, who had recently been knighted, decided to train Arthur in the knightly arts himself. But Kay was vain and jealous of the favor Arthur found with their father, so he was a harsh taskmaster. Arthur came away from his lessons in swordsmanship with many bruises and cuts. When he complained, Kay replied, "A knight must be thick-skinned and ready to bear even grievous wounds without flinching." Yet if Arthur so much as pricked his brother, Kay would bellow loudly for the physician. Eventually, Kay appointed Arthur his apprentice. This was an honor the younger boy would happily have foregone. So given how Kay can be a bit of a difficult person, even though it's not something, let's just say Arthur does not want to spend more time with Kay. However, seeing that Sir Ector wished it so, Arthur sighed and agreed. So sometimes, even though it's something we don't want to do, we might do it because someone we love wants us to do it, or it would help someone. But he felt in his heart that he already was a knight, though no lord had dubbed him such. So you're not born a knight. You can be born the child of a knight, but there's a whole training and knighting ceremony that has to happen. Both Arthur and Kay knew it was vital to learn the arts of war. The kingdom was still at the mercy of upstart lords who ruled by fire and sword. So once again, England, or what is now England and the UK and Wales and Ireland and Scotland, they're all filled with different lords and kings who are just trying to do what they want to do. They don't have one voice uniting them. So who do you think that's going to be? And by the way, this was true in a lot of places in the world. Here's this picture. The story of Uther's lost son, the true heir to the throne, would have been forgotten but for Merlin. One Christmas Eve, the long-absent magician reappeared and summoned the bishop, lords, and common folk to London Square. There he drove a broadsword halfway into a huge stone. Written on the blade in blazing gold letters were the words, "Whoso pulleth out the sword from this stone is born the rightful king of England." In the days that followed, knights and barons, cowherds and bakers, an endless parade of would-be kings eagerly pulled out the sword, but none could loosen it, let alone draw it forth. When they accused Merlin of trickery, so because they couldn't do it, they assumed that it was not fair, it was a trick, he said, "The rightful king has not yet come. God will make him known at the proper time." So here they are. Here's the sword and the stone. Now it happened that a great tournament was held in London. Among those who came were Sir Ector, Sir Kay, and young Arthur, who served Kay. So eager was the boy to see the joust that he forgot, to pack Kay's sword. There was great upset when the mistake was discovered. "Woe to you, boy," snarled Kay. "If your error or mistake costs me the victory I would otherwise win today." Even Sir Ector scolded Arthur and ordered, "Go back directly and fetch the missing sword." So even back in the olden days, you had to bring your gear, right? Just like in KX, we asked you, did you bring your letter card? Did you bring back your folder, your book club, books? Where's your backpack? Everybody has to learn these things. Angry at his carelessness and impatient to see the contest, Arthur started homeward. Then he suddenly reined in his horse. In the deserted city square was a massive stone with a sword plunged into its center. "Surely that sword is as good as the one I left at home," he said. "I will borrow it. When Kay is finished, I will return it to this curious monument." So saying, he dismounted and scrambled up the stone, took the sword handle, and tugged. The sword did not move. Impatient to return to the tournament, he pulled again. This time, the sword slid easily out of the stone. What does that mean, KX? In his haste, he did not notice the words upon the blade. Shoving the weapon into his belt, he remounted and raced to where Sir Kay waited his turn upon the field. And his horse is waiting too. Very patiently, here's his horse. It's a good horse, that is, that you don't have to tie it up and doesn't run away. So if he hadn't forgotten the sword, then he would not have tried to come back, right? So sometimes what seems like a mistake or seems like something you didn't want to happen might work out for the best. The moment he saw the golden words upon the blade, Kay began to tremble with excitement. When Arthur asked what was amiss or what was wrong, amiss, that's a nice word, Kay shouted, "Go, get away! You have caused enough trouble." But Arthur was curious, so he followed as Kay ran to Sir Ector. "Look, father," cried Kay, "here is the sword of the stone. Therefore, it is I who must be king of all this land." What do you think about that? When Sir Ector and the others saw the sword and read the golden inscription, they began to shout, "The sword from the stone, the king's sword!" Hearing only this much, Arthur thought he had stolen a king's weapon. As people hurried excitedly towards Kay, Arthur spurred his horse away, certain he had committed a great crime. Looking back, he saw Kay and Sir Ector ride off, surrounded by the greatest lords of the realm. Were they taking Kay to trial, he wondered? Had he brought ruin upon Sir Ector's household? A true knight would not run away, he said to himself. Do you think that's true? And I am a true knight in my heart, fearful, but determined to do what was right. The boy wheels his horse around. Right? As we say in Catholics, you have to be brave and own your mistakes. Right? Eshi, it's time to put that away.
Okay.
The great square was now filled with people. Just how terrible a crime had he committed? Upon the stone stood Kay, holding the sword. The crowd shouted each time he held the blade aloft. Then silence fell over the throng. Merlin had appeared at the edge of the square. People stood aside to let the magician approach the stone. "Are you the one who pulled the sword from the stone?" Merlin asked. "I am holding it, am I not?" Kay replied. "The rightful king could pull it free 100 times, said Merlin. "Slip the sword into the groove and pull it out again." What do you think's going to happen, Eshi?
He's not.
With a shrug, Kay reinserted the sword, but when he tried to jerk it free, it would not budge. Dun, 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 dun.
Oh.
Suddenly, all eyes turned toward Arthur, who was pushing his way through the crowd, bellowing at the top of his lungs. "It wasn't Kay's fault. I brought him the sword." Merlin peered closely at Arthur. Then he smiled and said, "Climb up and draw the sword from the stone." Uncertainly, Arthur clambered up beside Kay, grasping the pommel, or the handle. You also have a pommel on a horse's saddle. That's the front part of the saddle. He easily pulled the sword out. Then Merlin cried, "This is Arthur, son of Uther Pendragon, Britain's destined king." An astonished Sir Ector knelt to pay the boy homage, or show their respect, followed by Kay and many others. But all around there was growing confusion and dispute. Some cried, "It is the will of heaven, long live the king," while others cried, "It is Merlin's plot to put a beardless boy or a young, inexperienced boy, a puppet, someone that Merlin could manipulate or do what he wanted to do, on the thrones, and so rule the land." The cries of "Long live King Arthur" soon carried the day, but many powerful knights and barons rode away angry, vowing never to accept Arthur as their king, because they suspect that if you had Arthur as your king, it really would be Merlin making all the decisions. Eshi, put your blankets away. Arthur was crowned in London, but it was the custom for Britain's high king to be crowned in a second time as King of Wales. So Arthur, Merlin, and his court rode to the old walled city of Caerleon. On the day of his coronation feast, enemy lords laid siege to the city. They breached the gates and battled their way into the great hall. Just when all seemed lost, Arthur rose up like a blazing fire against his enemies. In the struggle, his weapon was shattered. Brandishing his broken weapon, he led a counterattack that drove the rebels from the hall and from the city. Though the city was secure, the king's forces were outnumbered by the enemy beyond the walls. More rebels joined the siege at Caerleon. Hourly. Not looking good. And he's got a broken sword. Can you fight with a broken sword?
No.
No. Ooh, what's happening? In the great hall, Arthur stared unhappily at his broken sword. "If I had a proper king's sword, I would rout those rebels once and for all," he boasted. "You have courage and a strong right arm," said Merlin. "In a short time, you have shown you have the makings of a just and wise ruler. These things are more important than a sword. No matter how finely made, the people trust you." "Yes," Arthur said, with a thin smile, "but I would more easily trust myself if I had a proper sword." "Then you shall have it," said Merlin. "Come, we have a great distance to travel in a short time." We're going to pause there. What's going to happen?